He tried to gauge the distance to safety. "I'll do it until I can't any more." The harbour lay behind a huge set of gates at the far end of Batavia's central boulevard. Once those gates closed behind them, they'd be beyond the crowd's reach. Unfortunately, they were at the tail end of a long procession moving slowly in the heat. The gates seemed no closer now than when they'd left the humid dampness of the dungeon at midday. A rock thudded into the ground at Arent's feet, spraying his boots with dried dirt. Another ricocheted off Sammy's chains. Traders were selling them out of sacks and making good coin doing it. "Damn Batavia," snarled Arent. "Bastards can't abide an empty pocket." On a normal day, these people would be buying from the bakers, tailors, cordwainers, binders, and candlemakers lining the boulevard. They'd be smiling and laughing, grumbling about the infernal heat, but manacle a man and offer him up to torment, and even the meekest soul surrendered itself to the devil. "It's my blood they want," argued Sammy, trying to push Arent away. "Get yourself to safety, I'm begging you." Arent looked down at his terrified friend, whose hands were pressing ineffectually against his chest. His dark curls were plastered to his forehead, those high cheekbones swollen purple with the beatings he'd received while imprisoned. His brown eyes, usually wry, were wide and desperate. Even maltreated, he was a handsome sod. By contrast, Arent's scalp was shorn, his nose punched flat. Somebody had bitten a chunk out of his right ear in a fight, and a clumsy flogging a few years back had left him with a long scar across his chin and neck. "We'll be safe once we reach the docks," said Arent stubbornly, having to raise his voice as cheers erupted ahead of them. The procession was being led by Governor-General Jan Hahn, who was stiff-backed on a white stallion, a breastplate fastened above his doublet, a sword clattering at his waist. 13 years ago, he'd purchased the village that had stood here on behalf of the United East India Company. No sooner had the natives signed the contract than he'd put a torch to it, using its ashes to plot out the roads, canals, and buildings of the city that would take its place. Batavia was now the company's most profitable outpost, and Hahn had been called back to Amsterdam to join the company's ruling body, the enigmatic Gentleman 17. As his stallion trotted along the boulevard, the crowd wept and cheered, stretching their fingertips toward him, trying to touch his legs. Flowers were thrown on the ground, blessings bestowed. He ignored it all, keeping his chin up and eyes forward. Beak-nosed and bald-headed, he put Arent in mind of a hawk perched atop a horse. 4 panting slaves struggled to keep pace with him. They were carrying a gilded palanquin with the Governor-General's wife and daughter inside, a red-faced lady's maid scurrying alongside it, fanning herself in the heat. Behind them, 4 bow-legged musketeers gripped the corners of a heavy box containing the folly. Sweat dripped from their foreheads and coated their hands, making it difficult to hold. They slipped frequently, fear flashing across their faces. They knew the punishment should the Governor-General's prize be damaged. Trailing them were a disorderly cluster of courtiers and flatterers, high-ranking clerks and family favourites, their years of scheming rewarded by the opportunity to spend an uncomfortable afternoon watching Hahn leave Batavia. Distracted by his observations, Arent allowed a gap to form between himself and his charge. A stone whistled by, hitting Sammy on the cheek, bringing a trickle of blood and jeers from the crowd. Losing his temper, Arent scooped up the stone and hurled it back at the thrower, catching him on the shoulder, sending him spinning to the ground.